Hello and welcome to our tutorial video on how to perform a pre-flight inspection of a Diamond DA40 aircraft here at Genesis Flight College. So before you begin, always confirm which aircraft that has been assigned to you because changes can happen last minute. Now we'll need a few things before we get started. A yellow dispatch card can be grabbed from the dispatch desk. Next, we'll also need to bring a gas can along with us to the aircraft. This is where we'll be dumping our fuel samples that will be taken during the inspection. Make sure to grab the red can for 100 LL and the yellow can is going to be used for jet fuel. We'll also need to grab an oil rag. Here at the airplane, we can place the gas can underneath the aircraft so it can be reached from all fuel sampling points. We should remove the front of the chock so that we can roll the plane forward and check the tires. We can now open the canopy and check for pen marks on the interior and also make sure that there are no keys in the ignition. Also check that the parking brake has not been left on. Find the checklist and we can get started with the pre-flight checks. The first item on the list is to turn on the battery side of the master switch. Now we can check our flaps for full travel by putting them down to the takeoff position and then down to the landing position and then back up to the takeoff position and then back to cruise. We want to make sure that the flaps travel freely and they stop where they're supposed to stop. We can now turn on all of our light switches and walk around to each wingtip to ensure that they all work. We have a taxi and landing lights on the leading edge of the left wing. On the left wingtip, there's a red position light, a white position light, and a strobe light. And over here on the right wingtip, there is a green position light, another white position light, and another flashing strobe light. The light switches now need to be turned off, and do not forget this step. We can check if the databases are current on the MFD now, but this is only a strict requirement for IFR flights. Pressing the soft key will bring up the map screen, and then pressing the engine soft key on the left will bring up our engine page. We can see the fuel gauges, which should show us our fuel quantity. However, there's always a possibility that they're not accurate. There could be a glitch in the system, there could be water in the tanks, there's even a small part of the fuel tank that the fuel probe can't measure properly. So we always need to double check our fuel quantity by always referring to the fuel calculator, which should show a similar quantity. The fuel calculator needs to be manually reset when fueling, and it will determine fuel quantity independently of the gauges by calculating the fuel burn over time instead of directly measuring it. If there's a mismatch, then always assume the lower quantity is the fuel. If there's insufficient fuel on either gauges or the calculator, then we'll need to fill before we fly. Now the master switch is turned off, we can remove the control lock. We can check the trim tab at the back by pulling back on the stick and rolling the trim wheel all the way back. The tab will disappear from view. Now we can push the stick forward and cycle the wheel forward. The tab will once again disappear from view. Now we can perform the walk around. Leave the checklist, but bring your oil rag and fuel tester cap and stall horn tester. Check the canopy for excessive bug splatter or other dirt and debris that could obstruct vision. Now we can check the step. This is important to ensure our safety while getting into the aircraft. Look for these two bolts to have no sign of cracking. Moving to the wing, we can look at the upper and lower surface as well as the stall strip and leading edge. Under the wing, above the tire, we have the left fuel tank drain. Use the cup to get a sample of the fuel, typically at least half the cup, and look at the color and clarity. The fuel should be light blue in color and free from any contaminants like dirt or water. Water appears clear and will sink to the bottom. Here's an example of water in the fuel sample. Once the sample has been checked, it can be dumped into the fuel can that we brought out. It is leaded fuel, so try to minimize any skin contact and wash your hands when you're done. Next is our left main landing gear. The strut looks free of any damage. Along the back of the strut, the brake line is secured and there's no signs of leaking hydraulic fluid, which will be red in color. We check the brake caliper as well as the disc to make sure that it is not worn down too thin. The tire itself needs to be properly inflated and in good condition. Check for any bald spots. If a bald spot is worn down to the cord, such as this example, then the tire needs to be replaced. Even if the grooves are completely worn down smooth, as long as there's rubber, then the tire is airworthy. If a bald spot is detected, check for white marks on the sidewall. Here at Genesis, this shows that the bald spot has already been noticed by somebody else and is responsible for that damage. If you notice a bald spot without a white mark, then it's likely the previous flight that damaged the tire and needs to be reported to your instructor or dispatch. If you do not notice it and report it, then you might end up being responsible for the damage. A red mark on the sidewall adjacent to the red mark on the rim shows that the tire has not slipped. Continuing along the wing, we get to the stall horn opening. At slow speeds, low air pressure from the top of the wing will move forward to the leading edge to suck air out of the opening. This will make a sound in the cockpit. We can test this by applying the suction with a device such as this. The rest of the upper and lower wing surfaces need to look good. You can visually check the fuel as well, but you most likely won't see any fuel quantity if it's below 3/4. When you replace the cap, make sure that the flap of the fuel cap hinges backwards with the airflow. Check for any missing or loose access panels on the underside. Also, underneath is the pitot mast. Remove the pitot cover and do not put it back, or it could be forgotten about and left on. There are 3 openings, and check for any blockages. The dynamic pressure source on the front is for the airspeed, the static pressure source on the back for the altimeter and airspeed, and the drain hole on the bottom. Next, make sure all screws are secured on the light housing as well as the wing cap. The tie-down ring can also be checked for evidence of wing strike. If a wing strike occurs while landing, the bottom of the ring will be worn down flat, such as this example. White paint indicates damage as old and has already been inspected by maintenance. On the back of the wing, we have static wicks to check here and here. They help to dissipate the static charge buildup over the airframe, which can interfere with our radios. The ailerons should be checked for full range of motion, both up and down. Check the linkages here. There are 4 hinges to check as well. And make sure there are no foreign objects in the aileron paddle. Next, the flap. Aside from a bit of a wiggle, the flap should not move freely. Again, check the linkage and the 6 hinges to check along the flap's length, plus the mass balance housed in here. It is also important to roll the aircraft forward a couple feet to verify there are no bald spots hidden on the underside of the tire. When opening the rear canopy, always hang on to the canopy until it's fully open before letting go. Allowing the canopy to swing open risks damaging the hinges. They're breakaway hinges designed to allow the canopy to separate from the aircraft if opened in flight. We do not want to have that happen on the ground. All baggage should be safely stowed either in the baggage area or strapped to the seats, and do not leave any loose items on the back seats. We can check for the first aid kit and the fire extinguisher, make sure that it's secured and charged. Now we can inspect the fuselage skin for any damage or cracking. We have the COM1 antenna on top and the COM2 antenna underneath. This fin on the bottom is where the marker beacon is for the ILS. We have 1 transponder antenna. On top, we have 2 blisters, our GPS receivers, and our VOR antenna is actually located inside the horizontal stabilizer. The aft fuselage is also free from any damage. And underneath the tail, we have the tail skid plate, which will contact the ground if the airplane gets too nose up on takeoff or landing. A piece of intact tape tells us that there has been no recent tail strikes. If the tape has been scraped off, then there's likely a tail strike that has happened in the previous flight and it needs to be reported. Now we can check the rudder for full travel and make sure it stops without getting jammed. Check the cables on both sides for any fraying or other wear. This is the trim tab, and is there to offset the yaw from the propeller slipstream. It has been bent to a specific position, so don't touch it or bend it. Always grab the rudder from down here to move it back and forth. Now we can check full travel in the elevator as well. More static wicks are here and here. Trim linkages are here, and also look for the locking wires along with the trim tab. Now the other side of the elevator with 2 more static wicks and the other side of the fuselage. Let's again roll the plane forward to check for hidden bald spots on the bottom of the tire. The right side flap is much the same as the left. No excessive movement, 6 hinges, mass balance, and the linkage. Ailerons also should travel full motion. A secure link, 4 hinges and a paddle. Wing cap is secure with the static wicks and the tie-down ring undamaged. Fuel check and secure the cap with the hinge backwards. The leading edge of the upper and lower surfaces and the wing are undamaged with no loose access panels. And now to get another fuel drain. Same thing as before, half a cup of fuel, checking for blue color and clarity. Right main tire isn't flat and secured to the rim. Any bald spots that are not worn to the cord have been marked with white on the sidewall. Brake disc is not excessively worn, and the brake line is secured to the strut with no leaking hydraulic fluid. Right side step is secured as well. We can take our last fuel sample from the gasolator here on the bottom. This is the lowest point of the fuel system, so water and debris might have collected here. Up here we can check the oil. Remove the dipstick and wipe it clean to get an accurate reading. Put it all the way in and then pull it out to see the oil level. 4 quarts is minimum for VFR operation, 6 quarts for IFR. When replacing the oil cap, do not over tighten. This will cause the cap to seize and will also cause metal shavings from the dip screw threads to fall into the oil. Only tighten until snug. At the first bit of resistance, stop tightening. It will not come loose. Close the oil flap and secure. Note this is not a screw, but a cam lock. So push it in fully, twist 90 degrees, and it should catch. Check for any loose cowl screws. Here is the air intake for the cabin air. On the front, we have 2 air intakes for cooling the engine. They need to be free from any obstructions such as bird's nests. In colder months, you will find a yellow baffle plate installed on one side. It should be in when surface temperatures are below 10 degrees, but must be removed when it's above 15. When in doubt, take it out. Your instructor, a dispatcher, or maintenance can help remove or install it for you. Check the prop spinner for any damage or loose screws. The propeller blades also need to be inspected. It can be hard to see damage, but easier to feel, so run your finger along the leading edge. Also, check for excessive play or movement in the blades. Underneath the spinner is the engine air take for combustion, which needs to be free from any obstructions. Check the exhaust pipe and the nose gear. Inspect the tire for proper inflation and any wear. There is no braking or steering mechanism on the nose tire, so it isn't prone to any bald spots, but you can still see wear over time. Check the strut and the linkages too. Look for any loose cowl screws on this side and check the cabin air intake. Down here we have the oil breather tube. It is normal for a few drops of oil to collect underneath. And now we're back to where we began, which completes the walkaround. Make sure all equipment such as the fuel can and testers end up back where they belong, and throw out any used oil rags in the garbage can. Do not leave any rags in the aircraft. Make sure the front chock has been replaced and reinstall the control lock before you go back inside for your briefing and sign out procedures. If you have any questions about the walkaround, or if you discover any problems, always consult with your instructor. And thanks for watching, and fly safe.